Welcome to Cutting with the Chase with Rob Chase, brought to you by the Inland Northwest Report.com. Alternative news and opinion for the Inland Northwest. And now, here's your host, Rob Chase.
Hi, this is Rob Chase with Cutting to the Chase, brought to you by the Inland Northwest Report.com. Today our guest is Kaery Concealed. As you may know, Kaery is, or as you may guess, Kaery is a Second Amendment supporter of the right to bear arms, of course. And Kaery teaches gun safety and how to get a permit and target practice too. So let's cut to the chase, Kaery. And what is a nice lady like you doing carrying around a dangerous weapon like you have? Did your parents raise you that way?
That's a very good question. Did my parents raise me that way? I wouldn't say they raised me to carry a firearm because I'm old now, almost a half century, and so concealed carry wasn't really, part of my life growing up. My dad was in law enforcement, and so he had his firearm with him everywhere he went. Didn't need to have a permit, of course, to do that back then. So, but my parents certainly taught me that I am responsible to take care of myself. I can't expect somebody to be there to save me. Mm-hmm. I also understand that men are a lot stronger than women are, and there's many instances where a firearm in the right hands is a great equalizer and gives women a chance to be able to protect themselves or their children. Mm-hmm. So for me, I didn't really start developing an interest in concealed carry or even personal protection inside the home until our first child was born, and when I held her for the first time, and the mama bear starts to happen, and I just realized that even if something horrible happened and I called police, they would be there as quickly as they possibly could. Mm-hmm. But horrible things happen at the least expected time, and so the joke is, well, I carry a firearm because I can't carry a police officer with me everywhere I go. And if I could, I definitely would, of course. I think a lot of people would. But.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a response time, too, and things happen so quickly. A lot of times, I guess, there's there to clean up after what has happened. So that's why it's important, especially, I think, for a woman to have an equalizer.
Yeah. We live in a rural area, and I've lived there almost my whole life. And, the county seat is a little over an hour away. Mm-hmm. And typically there are, I don't know what it's like now, but in the, 70s and 80s, there would often on the night shift be two officers, one for the north end of the county and one for the south end of the county. And we're at the extreme southern end of the county. So, depending on where that deputy was called, it could end up being an hour for response time if something happened, and that's a long time. Mm-hmm. If there's an extreme emergency. Back then, ambulances had to come out of Spokane, and that was a long time to wait sometimes for people. So
yeah, well, I suppose a lot of women take martial arts, for instance, but that takes a lot of time before you can become like a
proficient
kung fu expert. Yeah. And then what if the person who's assaulting you has a gun too?
Right.
At least you, if you maybe practice quick draw or something, and that would be probably just as easy for a woman as for a man, I would think.
Sure. I think martial arts, the thing that I looked into that actually, and as my children started to get a little bit older, I looked into that for them. What was difficult to find we're talking almost 20 years ago now. It was difficult to find a martial art that actually did teach viable self-defense principles. Mm-hmm. And so you can do taekwondo or karate or something like that. Krav and jiu-jitsu were really relatively new in this area at that time. I don't even know if there were any schools available then. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there is a big ramp-up time, and there can be injuries and that sort of thing. My body is not nearly as strong, or it certainly doesn't heal as quickly as it used to. Mm-hmm. But I would say, though, the amount of time that I spend training with my firearm and taking classes is probably on par with the amount of time that people spend training in martial arts, would be my guess. But I feel that's my responsibility as a firearm owner, to be able to handle that firearm responsibly and safely. And a lot of women, their primary concern will be, in my experience with the people that I teach, and I think we're in our 8th year now of teaching classes, it seems that a man's primary concern is the legalities of personal protection. And, if I use my firearm to protect myself or my family, then what could happen to me legally? Would it bankrupt my family with a defense and those sorts of things? Or even carrying their firearm in a place where it would be, might be illegal, that sort of thing. A woman's primary concern is almost always the safety aspect of it. They're concerned about hurting themselves or someone else with that firearm. And then the statistics that they throw at ladies all the time, where they say, women, if you have a firearm in the home, you're more likely to be hurt with that firearm than you are to use it to protect yourself. And that's actually a fallacy when you look at where that information came from. It's actually incorrect information that's being shared.
My mother was a very big worrier, and she, if I have no guns in the room, nothing can happen. She didn't want to add to her worrying because, we just didn't have any guns in the home, even a BB gun.
Sure.
And going back to like the Christmas movie, you'll put your eye out if you have that. They didn't want to afford the doctor bills,
Sure.
and then if something could happen, it probably will. So we were raised without any guns, and I didn't even really fire one until I went in the Army, and then that was just like target practice. And but I remember, my brother and I were raised that way, and then our mother passed away, and it was so into our heads that we could not have a gun.
Right.
And I think I was like 27 years old, my brother
Sure.
was 22, and we were at Ernst Hardware, and we were thinking, boy, it sure would be fun to buy a BB gun. And all of a sudden it hit us both at the same time. Hey, Mom's gone. And we actually can. So we bought BB guns, and we did like some of the neighbor kids used to. We set up our little plastic soldiers and had battles, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then my in-laws visited, and they were kind of making fun of me, and then they wanted their shot at it too, because it's kind of fun shooting as little plastic army men.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the sad thing is I completely understand your mom's hesitation, and I think a lot of women have that same hesitation about having firearms in the home, and if I just don't have them around, then nothing bad can happen. But with the number of firearms that we have in our country, the likelihood of our children entering a home and coming in contact with a firearm is significant. I mean, there's enough firearms in our country for every man, woman, and child, and then some. So that's a lot of firearms. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with the statistic that only 37% of firearm owners say that they store their firearms in such a way that prohibited persons can't get in contact with them. That's a problem. Only 37% of people are storing their firearms safely.
Yeah.
And there's two different, ways that we discuss firearms in the home. And if I just don't have them around, then nothing bad can happen. But with the number of firearms that we have in our country, the likelihood of our children entering a home and coming in contact with a firearm is significant. I mean, there's enough firearms in our country for every man, woman, and child, and then some. So that's a lot of firearms. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with the statistic that only 37% of firearm owners say that they store their firearms in such a way that prohibited persons can't get in contact with them. That's a problem. Only 37% of people are storing their firearms safely.
Yeah.
And there's two different, ways that we discuss firearms in the home. We have firearms that are for sporting and recreation, hunting. Those firearms in our family, those guns are unloaded before they come into the house. You can't transport them in a vehicle loaded anyway, and long guns. And so those are unloaded before they come into the house, and they're not ever loaded in the house. They're only loaded outside the house. So any of the recreational firearms that we have are stored, locked in a safe, unloaded. And then the firearms that we have designed that are staged for defensive purposes, those are secure, but they're secure and staged in such a way that we can access them quickly, but they can't fall into the wrong hands. And there's all kinds of great devices available now that you can store.
You can quickly
Absolutely.
grab them.
Yeah, it's really phenomenal what's out there.
But
and
kept
what's
safe from if you've got little
You
kids
betcha.
running around.
Yeah, and I've got a lot of little kids. So I have 7 children, and my youngest is 7, and my oldest just turned 21.
I think we were playing Army when I was a kid in Seattle, and I wanted to be pretty elaborate, so we had an old deer rifle. I could barely lift the thing that my grandfather's wife had given my father, so that we'd have a gun, but it wasn't loaded or anything.
Sure.
So I put on my dad's World War II jacket that we still had in the basement, and gun. And all the other kids are pretty impressed. One of the neighbors told my mom, Of course, got rid of the gun right away.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think when women learn, when they're willing to take that step and, take responsibility for their own safety and for the safety of their family, they're really often excited to hear that there actually are safe handling rules for firearms, and there are only 4 of them, and any class you take with me, by the time you leave that class, you have those 4 firearm safety rules memorized. And so anytime you interact with firearms, I encourage my students to think about those 4 firearm safety rules and what are they, and review them, talk about them with the people that you're with, because it's shocking the number of people that don't know that there actually are rules for safe gun handling that apply in all circumstances.
So these aren't official rules, so it's just like common sense rules.
Well, they are common sense rules, but common sense isn't so common, right?
Yeah.
And so, so there are 4 firearm safety rules. The first one is that you want to treat all guns as if they're loaded all the time, no matter what. So treat them that way. And by treating them that way, that would mean that we wouldn't point them at anything that we don't want to destroy. And then we also wouldn't put our finger on the trigger of a loaded gun unless we intended to pull the trigger. So the first 3 are easy to remember. Treat all guns like they're loaded. Don't point the gun at anything you don't want to destroy, and keep your finger well outside the trigger guard, high in the frame of the pistol. I like to describe it as your fingers at home plate until it's time to go to work, and when it goes to work, it goes on the face of the trigger, and it goes to work. As soon as it's done at work, it goes right back home to home plate. And then the last one is just be aware of your target and what's around it, because we discussed that 9mm cartridge or the bullets can travel up to a mile if unimpeded, sometimes even more than a mile. So, and that's just a pistol caliber cartridge. Rifle calibers can travel even farther than that.
I've wondered about that, because I've seen, say in the Middle East, you see the
shooting
people
into
celebrate
the air.
shooting up in the air. Don't they come back down?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's many
bop
cases.
people in the head?
Yep. Well, there's cases. There's a case out of Pennsylvania, several out, and this is just the past couple years, several out of Texas. There was even a Texas legislator that somebody had shot a firearm into the air, and the round came down and ended up hitting him in his skull. And I can't remember if he passed. No, it wasn't Dick Cheney. That was birdshot. But I can't remember. I don't think he passed, but he was severely injured. But there's a child in Amish country where somebody was cleaning their firearm, and the firearm discharged into the air, and ended up coming down and hitting a toddler in the top of the head, and she died. So what goes up must come down, absolutely. So I often wonder where those rounds go. I don't know if there's a lot of, I don't know if they've got pastures or dead goats laying around, or hopefully not dead people from the Middle East.
But expensive, so you wouldn't think they'd be doing too much.
But they do. It's part of their celebrations, though. Often marriages.
Well, like firecrackers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Those are a lot cheaper.
But they're closer to what you might call a frontier than we are. We're actually, we aren't that far away. We probably have a few generations. Our grandparents, great grandparents were around that all the time because they had to live. I mean, mostly until the specialization of labor and grocery stores and all these wonderful things of the 20th century and down to the 21st, people were spending a lot of their time looking around for something to eat. That's why
absolutely.
A lot of the guys, the Appalachians, were made great soldiers or snipers because they could hit squirrels. I mean, from quite a distance. It's a matter of do we eat tonight or not. Yeah,
there's a great program called Project Appleseed, and they combine history, so Revolutionary War history, with marksmanship. And so they do typically 2-day classes all across the country. There's one in Port Townsend in a couple of weeks. They do them at Fran Rod.
Is that the one where you dress the part too? You dress up like Daniel Boone?
No, you don't dress up at all with this. But you shoot, it's almost all 22. You can shoot other calibers, but they it's preferable to shoot 22, so you're not laying next to somebody shooting a,
Well, there's all these different calibers, and it's very confusing. To me, I wish there was like a book for dummies on.
There are lots of them though.
I looked for like the Dummies or the Idiot's Guide, and I couldn't find. But there are more elementary books. But okay, here's what a 22 is versus a 9mm. And here's why we even say millimeters. Why do they use the metric system for some? And
right. Yeah. Well, it would depend on where the round was developed. Like the 9mm was developed in Germany, and so that's why it's millimeters.
Oh, I see.
But you're right. Some of
them.
If
it's a European gun, then it goes by millimeters.
Well, I don't know exclusively. I know handguns. I mean, I shoot rifles, but I would not come anywhere close to considering myself.
Well, the only one I ever shot with any was target practicing in the Army, and I think it was M16 we had. And then that was shot 223.
Yep, 223.
I think. And then is that bigger than a 22, or is it?
Actually, the bullet diameter is the same, but the cartridge length is more. So there's more gunpowder, so it's the bullet is moving faster, and therefore it does more damage as far as terminal ballistics. It does more damage when it hits what it's hitting. So than a 22 long rifle, for example, cartridge would do.
Yeah.
So bullet diameter is the same, but it's a very different cartridge.
What are the most popular guns people buy, do you think? Especially, say, for a woman. That's probably lighter, you know.
Well, it depends. So if you go to your local gun store, they'll say, come on, little lady, come on down to this end of the counter where the revolvers are. You can handle a little 5-shot airweight snub-nose revolver, which is, I would say, probably the most miserable handgun on the planet, and surely the most miserable for women. It's horrible. It's awful. It hurts most men that take classes with a 38 snub-nose will not complete the class with that. At least in my experience, most of the men that show up with a little snub nose won't complete a 500 rounds over 2 days because it's so painful by the time they're done. But so for women, I mean, sadly, what is sold to women are those 38 special snub nose revolvers, the airweight. So they weigh very little. So, and there's a ton of recoil because it's a revolver, so there's no slide moving to help with some of that felt recoil. And then the other one that's very common, which is sad that women purchase, are the little tiny 380 like pocket pistols.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because in the cowboy shows, the women all had the derringers.
Yeah, the little derringers. Yeah,
you know,
they still make
dance
those.
Hall queen with, you know,
Yeah,
shoot
absolutely.
The rude cowboy with it.
Yeah,
You know,
those are miserable.
They are miserable.
Oh, well,
okay.
no, the derringers are fine because that's just a 22. But the first two guns I mentioned are miserable, and that's what a lot of women. If a woman comes to one of my classes, or we have a chapter of the Well and Women in Spokane, if they come to a Well and Women meeting and they've purchased a handgun for themselves, or a husband has purchased one for them, they almost always come with one of those two guns I mentioned, and often they'll shoot it with me a couple times, or they will have shot it before with their husband, and they'll say, it hurts. I don't really enjoy shooting it, and I don't enjoy shooting it either. So it's sad that women are directed toward those guns. But I say there are two things that women should learn from other women, and the first one is how to nurse a baby. And when my first child was born, and actually the next three, the first three, and it was always a woman. A nurse, typically an older nurse that had nursed her babies, came in and taught me how to nurse my children. It was never a man. And my husband actually worked labor and delivery occasionally when he was in school at Deaconess, and they never sent him in to teach a woman how to nurse her baby. It was always a woman they sent in. And it's the same thing with handguns. I think that, and rifles, I think that women should learn from other women. And it's because women, we think differently, we feel things differently. Most men, when they teach a woman in their life how to shoot, there's tears involved. And it's not because the guy's a bad guy, it's just there's a lot of emotion in shooting that guys don't understand, and that's okay that they don't. But women do understand that, and we're able to talk through it. And there's a lot of, men are so much stronger than women are, and especially upper body strength. And you need a lot of upper body strength in order to be able to easily accept recoil and not have it bother you.
Well, it seemed like if a powerful man is breaking and entering, the best thing to have, if you could access it right away, would be a shotgun. Because they see that big barrel and they figure, okay, she's probably not going to miss.
Well, truthfully, though, bad guys aren't going to be afraid of your gun. I mean, if a bad guy's a bad guy, they're not going to be afraid of your gun. But, so, and I say that to my students because I don't want people to ever go, look, I've got a gun, go away, that sort of thing. But in a home defense situation, first of all, every year in America, between 1 million and 2.5 million times a year, firearms are used to protect innocent life without a single shot being fired. And that's a study that's done every 2 years. I think it's University of Michigan or Michigan State that does that study. And so an example of that would be, somebody's at home and a bad guy kicks in the front door and somebody grabs a shotgun and goes, ch-ch. That's my 19-year-old.
Sound.
Yeah, my son calls that the international sound of peace. And then, bad guy goes. That would be an example of a firearm being used to protect innocent life without a shot being fired. But as far as home defense goes, it really depends because it depends on where you have children sleeping in your home. You have to think of where you would be when, a fight started. Hopefully you would be able to avoid the fight completely. But if you can't, then you want to be careful what you're using. If you're using a shotgun with a big slug, for example, that can go through many layers of sheetrock, and you'd have to, like my kids, we have 7 kids, so our kids are stacked like cordwood. We have triple high bunk, so where's that bunk bed at? And in the hallway and that sort of thing to think of. So for some people, there was a home invasion in I think it was Southern California a couple weeks ago. No, just last week, where 10 bad guys, or I think there were 2 women, invaded this home. And that's an example where having an AR style rifle would be.
Oh yeah.
I mean, having 5 rounds against against 10 people, determined aggressors. I can't guarantee that somebody would win that, and there's no, who knows if they're mentally deranged or if they're hopped up on something. Who knows? So anyway, so it just depends. So for most women aren't going to enjoy shooting a shotgun and trying to, for a woman trying to navigate a house and carry a shotgun, I don't ever recommend somebody clearing their own house. They be better for them to call police if they expect somebody's in the house. But using a handgun for home protection, that isn't a bad thing either. Whatever the person is most comfortable with, I think is best for them to use, as long as they're educated.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of stories that get amplified. Someone accidentally shot their child. I mean, it happens.
Well, there are examples of that. That's lack of training.
But
the
then
tragedy
I
is.
think people don't realize, well, it's probably 1 in a million or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if that stat
does
is.
happen.
But when it does happen, we always hear about it, right?
Oh, yeah,
and we should, because, I think firearm owners do the most damage to firearm owners. Because it's the idiot that, we had the instructor in Sunday in Southern California. A CCW instructor shot his student in the leg. That's awful. That speaks horribly for all gun owners, but also for instructors as well.
Yeah.
But I think firearm owners, we do more damage to each other than the media could ever do to us when we do stupid things with guns and when we handle them poorly, when we don't get training. It's interesting to me, we require all kids to take driver's ed in order to drive when they're 16, right?
Yeah.
But I guess when they're 18, then they can go ahead and get their driver's license. But they have to pass a test and they have to prove some level of competence. But we can, there's this idea in America that because granddad had a firearm or great-granddad and they handed it down to me, or maybe they didn't hand it down to me, but I know granddad had one, so therefore it must be innate. I must be born with the innate ability to be able to handle a firearm safely. And people just often don't seek firearm training. The sad thing is actually men that are the most averse to seeking firearm training, truly.
Yeah.
Women are usually, if a woman is, typically what happens for women is they will want to have the training before they even go buy a firearm. Guys will often have the firearms and then, maybe if somebody talks them into getting some training, they might do it. There are a few that are willing to take training, but
Right. Yeah, we don't want to appear vulnerable.
Well, and I think too,
we want to just have her bring our piece in and show me how to shoot this.
Well,
stuff.
and I think too also with firearms, it's so interesting. I don't know how the word. I'm not a man, so I don't know what it's like, but it's almost like there's a lot of shaming that happens because I think firearm owners do the most damage to firearm owners. Because it's the idiot that. We had the instructor in Sunday in Southern California. A CCW instructor shot his student in the leg. That's awful. That speaks horribly for all gun owners, but also for instructors as well.
Yeah.
But I think firearm owners, we do more damage to each other than the media could ever do to us when we do stupid things with guns and when we handle them poorly, when we don't get training. It's interesting to me, we require all kids to take driver's ed in order to drive when they're 16, right?
Yeah.
But I guess when they're 18, then they can go ahead and get their driver's license. But they have to pass a test and they have to prove some level of competence. But we can, there's this idea in America that because granddad had a firearm or great-granddad and they handed it down to me, or maybe they didn't hand it down to me, but I know granddad had one, so therefore it must be innate. I must be born with the innate ability to be able to handle a firearm safely. And people just often don't seek firearm training. The sad thing is actually men that are the most averse to seeking firearm training, truly.
Yeah.
Women are usually, if a woman is, typically what happens for women is they will want to have the training before they even go buy a firearm. Guys will often have the firearms and then, maybe if somebody talks them into getting some training, they might do it. There are a few that are willing to take training, but
Right. Yeah, we don't want to appear vulnerable.
Well, and I think too,
we want to just have her bring our piece in and show me how to shoot this.
Well, and I think too also with firearms, it's so interesting. I don't know how the word, I'm not a man, so I don't know what it's like, but
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like there's a lot of shaming that happens because, I'll see guys, I even get emails from guys who will, have gone to the gun counter and they admit, I don't know anything about guns, I
Yeah.
want to learn. So they go to the gun counter hoping to be educated and they, depending on where they go, but they often walk away feeling like a fool.
They're talked down to. Because they
Yeah,
don't
and
know.
the same thing happens, there's people that have poor experiences at some of our, gun clubs and ranges, even out public ranges, or not, I don't mean public ranges, on public lands, like shooting on public lands, like
Yeah.
out near where I live, there's a range that's open part of the year. And, even the shaming that happens there when people don't know about firearms. So it's tough, I think, for guys to
There's kind
get
of
the information they
a
want.
macho element, I think,
Yeah.
that goes right along with guns naturally. So,
Which is really too bad.
but people shouldn't let themselves worry about that. I mean, and that's easy for me to say, but
Yeah.
okay, it's like I guess that's something innate in males who don't like to be told. We just like to automatically think we have all the instincts.
Sure. Well, it could be, and I mean, a good instructor will, work with that in their students and understand that, and not do anything to belittle their student or, I often have men that will, after class, they'll come up and they'll say, well, I really just took this class because I wanted my wife to take it, but man, I learned so much.
Mhm.
Thank you for,
Yeah.
talking about these different things, and I didn't even know some of this stuff.
Well, I just had a thought that most guys get their gun training when they join the army.
Yeah.
And a lot of them do, even though there's really there's a few undeclared wars going on here and there. But that's kind of where, and the drill sergeants are brutal and mean. I mean, because it's not just a personal thing. They got 100 guys there,
Yeah.
so they can't afford one idiot
Sure.
messing it up.
Yeah.
So they do have to be kind of,
Sure.
you better snap to and
Well, a
not
lot-
point the gun at anybody. And,
Yeah, and a lot of the people that do, that was one of the things that was hard for me when I first realized that it was my responsibility to protect myself. I knew it was my responsibility, but I had this delusion of thinking I could just run away from anything, bad that happened. And then my daughter was born, and I just remember thinking, you can't run very fast carrying a baby.
Yeah.
But when I began looking for firearm training, it was impossible at that time, so 20 plus years ago now, to find firearm instruction that was from a civilian perspective and even address the needs and concerns of women. And most of the firearm training that I could find at that time, it was taught by current or retired law enforcement and current retired military. But I knew as little as I knew even then, I knew that I would not be carrying open. I would be concealed carrying. That's a different type of holster. It can be a different draw stroke depending on where you're carrying that firearm in your body. So, and military and law enforcement tactics are dramatically different than those of a civilian. The rules of engagement are entirely different. I would not be running to the sounds of gunfire unless my child was there. Then
Yeah.
I would be running to rescue my child. But I mean, if my kid's with me, I'm going to be running away from the sounds of gunfire. So, and if a civilian used the same rules of engagement that military and law enforcement have to operate under, that civilian's probably going to spend a lot of time in jail if they end up using a firearm to protect themselves, because a civilian should leave if they can. They have to do in my opinion, it's our obligation to do everything possible to avoid the fight. If we can diffuse it or even leave, that's our obligation to do that, so we don't have to use lethal force. If we have no choice, then that's different. But there's the case out of Florida. The verdict just happened. I think it was Friday, where it was the handicap parking spot out of a Florida convenience store. I don't know if you heard of or familiar with that one, but a gentleman felt like it was his responsibility to lecture people if they pulled into parking in a handicap spot, and so this guy gets out of his car and starts yelling at a woman who's in the car with her child, and the boyfriend is in the convenience store buying some snacks for the kids, and somebody comes into the convenience store and says, dude, there's a guy out there yelling at your woman. So goes out, and the boyfriend pushes the guy to get him away from the car, and the gentleman fell back on the ground, drew his firearm, and popped the guy in the chest, and got bled out and died right there. So that's an example of there was no... I mean, you can look at the video, and it's sad, because I bet if we were to talk to that gentleman, well, first of all, it's not his job to lecture people on where they park.
Sure, right.
If he has a problem with it, he should call law enforcement and let them be involved. But that's an example of, law enforcement should deal with the things law enforcement does, and they do it well. We should allow them to do that as citizens.
Yeah.
And as citizens, we don't deal with those things, but it gets us into trouble. And so that gentleman, he was, and he should have been found guilty of, according to the video anyway, and from what I've seen and heard about the case, he was found guilty of manslaughter, so probably do
Well, it
7
kind
to
of
10
brings
years.
me to another point. Do you think teachers should be allowed to carry?
That's a good
in
question.
school? And I would, of course, I thought about that. I thought, gee, if teachers were allowed to carry when I was a student, I may not be here today because of what you're
Well-
talking. Because you could, it'd be so easy to.
Well, there's a lot of, so with the right
Yeah.
training, I personally believe, this is my personal opinion,
Yeah.
I feel that it's our right to be able to protect ourselves and those we are responsible for. And I used to teach before I stayed home with our children, so I taught junior high and high school. There is something called National Train a Teacher Day that that I, as Kaery Concealed, participate in every year. It's usually in August. We just had it a couple weeks ago, where I offer a day of free training to anybody that's in education or administration in the state of Washington or in the state of Idaho. And it's a free day of training. I'll teach them how to carry their firearm, how to do it safely. And so I think with the right training, Texas, they have an actual program where the state of Texas certifies firearms instructors to teach teachers how to safely, legally, and responsibly conceal carry a firearm in Texas
Well,
schools.
if they're mature enough to teach children, they should be mature enough to have a concealed weapon. And maybe none of them choose to carry, but a criminal coming in and doesn't know that. Maybe it's a school janitor
Yeah.
that happens to have a piece with them,
Yeah.
So I think Columbine might have turned out differently if teachers had been allowed to carry and any of these other things. At least the mass shootings,
Sure.
A lot of times it's an incident, bullying or whatever, and
All kinds of different
Yeah.
things that are responsible. It's really sad. It's sad that we're where we are as a society. It really is.
Yeah, well, people I think have short and television and the gaming thing. That whole element is in there now that wasn't there when we were kids.
Yeah. I don't know that video games are responsible for what's happening. I certainly think there's an element of that's responsible for the demise of families in America. That's what I think our biggest problem is
Oh, yeah.
the disintegration of the American family is tragic. And
I belong to it's called Spokane's Fatherhood Institute, and one statistic they said was 90% of the guys in jail had no father
Yep.
figure in the
Very
home,
true.
so they weren't taught, to
and now their
control
kids
their
have no father
rage or their
figure
temper or
either.
their strength. Yeah.
It's really sad.
Yeah. So I think anybody out there that's listening, especially women, would want to have a woman's touch, for all the reasons we spoke about. So, Kaery, how did people get a hold of you if they
Sure.
want to take a class from you?
They can go to our website. That's the best way. So it's Kaery. My name is spelled strangely, but it's Kaery.
And is Concealed your Christian name?
Exactly. No. My maiden name. No, just
Oh,
kidding.
what country does that work? Okay.
So Kaery you can email me at Kaery@kaeryconcealed.com or just go to kaeryconcealed.com. Kaery concealed.
KaeryConcealed.com. Kaery. A little
Yes.
bit different version. There's a lot of different ways of spelling Kaery.
Yeah.
I think.
And we
Yours
offer
is unique.
Yeah,
that I've
yeah.
seen.
It's my dad chose my name, and I guess it's Gaelic, and it means little girl.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and you're always your daddy's little girl, right?
yeah, exactly.
But we teach classes all over Eastern Washington, sometimes even in Western Washington as well. We do them locally, but then we're launching an online curriculum, and that'll launch in October. And so I have a course, 30 Days to Conceal Carry, and that's a step-by-step process for men or women to investigate the idea of conceal carry. What does that look like? How do I learn to conceal carry? For a lot of ladies, just the idea of...
I've never done that, and I've never bought like the holster.
Right, what holster
Because I
do
don't
you
know, I
get?
can't think of any place where it wouldn't be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Training.
and it is, unless you know what to get. And so that's what we cover in this class, is a very step-by-step gradual approach to, so it's not 30 videos somebody has to watch, but it's a 30-day process
Yeah.
to conceal carrying. And it's not, a lot of people that have done that course locally in person, their goal isn't necessarily conceal carry at the end of the course, but they want to have the option of doing that if circumstances should arise. So anyway, so we teach classes locally. We do multi-state permit classes. We do basic firearm safety courses, gun cleaning clinics. 1639 now with the Washington state law that went into effect July 1st,
Right.
or this part of that law went into effect July 1st, part of it went in January 1st, but all Washington citizens are required to have training every 5 years in a specific set of criteria if they're going to purchase any semi-automatic rifle. So that's any semi-automatic, even a Ruger 1022. They have to have a training class. So we offer that training both in person and online.
Now, I went, and it was about a little over 10 years ago because it expired. I got a Utah permit.
Yeah. Yep.
And I had to go through that and get it. But now, do I have to go through everything again to get a Utah permit because I let it expire?
Yes.
The whole
Yep. Since you let it
classes
expire, yes. So you have to take the course again,
Uh-huh.
and then so with all of our courses, that's one of the things I really enjoy. Is we're really committed to training and helping people get the training that they need in order to be responsible firearm owners and responsible citizens. And so with any class you take with us, well, first of all, it comes with a 100% money back guarantee. So if people aren't happy with the class, I will give them their money back gladly. I've never had anybody ask for it back, but I tell them if we haven't met your expectations, please, I want to give your money back. I don't want you to be dissatisfied. And then we also offer free retakes or free refresher courses. So people, like, let's say they take a multi-state permit class with me 2 years ago and they want to step into it again and see what's changed. They're welcome to do that. So 10 years ago, had you taken your class from us to get your Utah multi-state, you could come back to one of our classes and we'd re-fingerprint you and all that so that you could apply for your Utah again.
Well, I would like to take a class from you.
I'd love to have
Kaery. And I'm comfortable with my sexuality. I'm not a very macho guy, so I would like to have a woman's touch. I'd feel more comfortable, I think, asking you questions and getting laughed at or harassed.
Sure. Occasionally we get some macho type guys in our classes, but it's interesting how they'll they diffuse pretty quickly. Believe it or not, there's a few things we talk about at the beginning of every class, and usually that ego comes off right away. We say, when you put your firearm on or when you start to handle a firearm, that ego needs to be taken off because you can't walk around with an ego.
They learn how to be sensitive, I think.
Yeah, or just be decent human beings instead of egotistical maniacs. But yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today, Kaery. And this has been Cutting to the Chase. And let's not forget to pray first.
This has been Cutting to the Chase with Rob Chase, where we cover anything under the sun that would be of interest to you, our viewers. Cutting to the Chase has been brought to you by the InlandNorthwestReport.com, alternative news and opinion for the Inland Northwest. Don't forget to catch our Sunday edition of Cutting to the Chase, where Rob will interview local pastors on Christian perspectives. Until next time, stay in prayer for God, family, and country.